call roll. Please note all board members are present. Kim Crockett, Billy Holland, Dr. Tracy Stritchett, Ms. Jamie Jackson, and Kyle Glover. Okay. At this time, I'm going to ask Mr. Justin Hall to please come up and lead us in today's invocation. So if everybody will please stand and then remain standing for the pledge.
Let's pray, guys. Father, we love you. We're so grateful to live in a town, in a community, in a country where we're able to gather and do important things like this today. Father, I just pray for the process that's about to begin. Lord, I pray for great wisdom and discernment to be given to this board that's behind me and to some other key decision makers, Lord, that's going to be here today. Lord, I pray for candidates that's going to come forward. God, I pray that you would give them the ability to speak in a way that helps us to understand their goals. Father, I thank you for the amazing programs that you have given to us here in our school systems. Lord, we thank you for each and every family and student that makes up this great program. And Lord, as we search for the next leader, Father, I pray that we would do what brings you honor, what brings you glory. Lord, I pray that everything that is said and done here today would be done with respect, and it would be done in a way that lifts your name high. Father, we love you, and it's in your name that we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. We do have some short business to conduct at this time. So, board members, you've received the agenda. Can I please get a second to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor to approve the agenda, please raise your right hand. Okay. Now, the one item for consider for approval is our personnel action. So, board members, you have received that in your packet, and you've had a chance to review that. Can I get a motion to approve the personnel report?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion about the personnel report? No? All in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, personnel report has been approved. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Boyd, and he is going to go over our superintendent interviews.
Thank you, Madam President. First, let me say that on April the 3rd, the Ottawa County Board of Education hired me as the interim superintendent. I am totally appreciative of that particular situation there, and I can say that I've worked with a wonderful group of professionals who truly believe in improving teaching and learning. While appointed as the interim superintendent, there was a request that I also serve as the person leading up the search for a new superintendent of Ottawa County. So in doing that, we developed a timeline. I want to share those with you just briefly so you guys all understand the whole process that took place with that. So in early May, the board asked if I could go ahead and do it, and of course I agreed to do this. Once we started the process, we posted the notice of vacancy. This was posted on May the 17th, and it went in numerous areas here. So some of the places we posted it was with AASB, or the Alabama Association of School Boards, also with the State Superintendents of Alabama, SSA. We also posted at all of our schools, and we posted at all our central office buildings, with the understanding that the posting would be there for 30 days or until June the 16th at 4 p.m. That was the application deadline for our candidates, with the understanding that we would schedule interviews on either June the 20th, June the 21st, or today, June the 22nd. And with the understanding that on June the 29th, we would name a new superintendent. But we also put at the bottom, as a caveat, the Ottawa County Board of Education reserves the right to modify any and all timeline. Thus far, we have not changed a single timeline, so we follow the script all the way through. But we do reserve that particular right. So if the board wishes to call or decide on a superintendent before the 29th, you have that ability to do so. Also, a few other things that we did is we discussed the desired characteristics of the next superintendent. Information was gathered about our district and information and data across the state. We met with designated stakeholders to make sure that we select the right individuals to be reviewed. In addition to that, we also utilize survey data. This is historical data that was taken a few years ago, but very, very important to understanding what the next superintendent, what characteristics the next superintendent should have. We refine those characteristics, and after that, on June the 15th, a survey instrument was provided to the board members on what's the most important attribute for these particular candidates. We then, over the weekend, developed a rubric or a scoring guide that would be used to categorize the candidates. So we had 3 different categories for the candidates. We had one pot, which was a score, which was the lower third or so, then a middle pot, and then the highest pot. And the highest category had 5 candidates in it, and those candidates will be interviewed today. We also checked references to make sure that these individuals were vetted, and we're now to the point where we're about to interview these 5 candidates. Hopefully, we'll have some really good interviews, and I really feel confident based on the results I've received, the paperwork that was provided, the betas, their history. I mean, it looks really, really good, but you all will get to decide. So I wish you good luck. And I think it's important to know that this is probably one of the most important decisions you guys will make while you're a board member. So good luck. I have all faith in you. I know you guys will choose the right candidate.
Thank you, Dr. Boyd. Okay. Okay. Now, are you ready?
So now what we will do is we'll call in our first candidate, and Ms. Harrington is going to bring him around, and while he's coming around, I'll just share a little information about him. The gentleman that's coming in, our first candidate, is Dr. John Barge. He has a doctorate degree. Dr. Barge currently works as an educational consultant. He has more than 30 years of educational experience, and he also served as the former state superintendent for the state of Georgia. And he should be coming out any second here, and he'll be seated right over here, and our board members will ask the questions. A total of 10 questions will be asked. And just so you know that 5 of those 10 questions were given to our candidates prior to the interview. The other 5 are questions they have no idea of. So, and each board member will have 2 questions, starting with Ms. Crockett. Ms. Crockett?
Okay. Good morning. I'm wonderful. How are you today?
Doing well. You guys
Awesome.
hear me okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Can you hear us?
I can.
Okay, thank you for coming. I will start off with the first question. Will you please give us a brief summary of your professional experiences, your personal beliefs on public education, and why you are interested in being the next superintendent of Watauga County?
Absolutely. I am a career educator. All of my educational career has been in the state of Georgia. My family is long-time residents of Georgia. But I knew at an early age that education was my ticket. I'm a first-generation college graduate. I knew that I wanted to go to college. I grew up in a home that, we ate free and reduced lunch, and my dad was a severe alcoholic, and things were tough. So I've experienced a lot of things that a lot of our children experience. And I knew that my solution was education. And so that drives my passion. So when I talk about, philosophies of education, I personally have experienced education as the great equalizer. I knew when I went into my high school that it didn't matter who I was, where I come from, that my dad was an alcoholic, that I didn't know where I was going to sleep at night, that I didn't know what, was going to be for dinner. I knew that if I took what my teachers were giving me, I could go as far as I wanted to go with that. And so I did well in school. I received numerous scholarships to college. I got to choose where I went to school. I went to college at Berry College in Rome, Georgia, where I still call home. And I became a teacher and taught for a few years. And I knew that I wanted to go into administration because my philosophy of education was, if I can influence my classroom, the 100 or so kids that I saw every day as a high school English teacher, then if that's the case, then as a principal, I could have an impact on an entire school by making sure I hired the right teachers, by making sure I set the right tone and the right expectations for students. And if that's the case, then as a superintendent, then I could have an impact and an influence on an entire community. So I immediately started my work in a master's degree in administration and went on and received my doctorate degree from University of Georgia in educational leadership. So I spent 5 years in the classroom, and the rest of that time was in administration, either as assistant principal, principal, curriculum director, a superintendent, state superintendent for the state of Georgia. So that's a little bit about my background, my professional, I guess, preparation, and my philosophies of education. It is the great equalizer, and I think it is, it's always been, but I think it is so critical now for our students and for us as educators to make sure that we're preparing them to be successful at whatever their next step is.
Awesome. Okay. So why are you interested in being the next superintendent?
Thank you. I found myself in a situation a couple of years ago with family circumstances. I had my daughter was graduating college, and she got married and had a child, and she was moving back home from Texas where she went to school, and she wanted to start a business, and she needed help with that and young children, and so I was in a position where I could retire from Georgia because of my years of service and do consulting and give myself a little bit more of a flexible schedule so that I could help her establish business and take care of children and that type of thing, and help my wife with that. And so I've been doing that for 3 years, almost 3 years. And the children are now in school. Her business is well established. She is incredibly successful. She goes all over the country training folks. And I'm ready to get back to the work that I love and that I know how to do, and I know that I can bring benefit. I've had several of my superintendent friends from Georgia who are now working in Alabama, specifically one from this area, who encouraged me specifically to apply for Autauga. So.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Thank you. Okay. My next question is, being a professional educator, you have experienced many highs and many lows. What is your greatest professional disappointment, and what did you learn from that?
So, just so folks understand the differences when it comes to state education between Alabama and Georgia, the state superintendent's position in Georgia is an elected position. It's not appointed. And I actually went to work as the state director of career and technical education for a state superintendent at the time, and that's when my eyes were open to the policy side of education and the politics, and I saw a person making educational decisions that impacted children and teachers that had never been a leader of a school, and I saw things heading in just really ununderstandable directions. And so I started thinking then that I would run for the office someday, because I felt it was really important that the chief policymaker for education have an understanding of education across the spectrum and an understanding of policy. And so I did that, and I won. I absolutely loved the work. It was in a really challenging time for Georgia economically when I was there. I'm sure you all remember the Common Core. My predecessor had adopted that, and I had to implement because the state board, and you understand how all that works. But we were very successful, and I loved the work. I was on the board of directors of the Council of Chief State School Officers. I had a voice on national policy, and I loved the work. But there were challenges politically between the governor's office and myself when it came to economics, the funding of education. Education was, the districts in Georgia were being withheld $1 billion of money that they earned every year that I was in office. And I saw the incredible impact it was having on our districts. Excuse me. Thousands of teachers across the state losing their jobs, class sizes going through the roof. I had 6 districts that were on the verge of bankruptcy. I went into an elementary school on one of my visits that had their lights turned off during the day because they couldn't afford their power bill. It was, the consequences were difficult. And so I listened to some outside voices that I probably shouldn't have listened to. I should have just stuck things out, but I ended up running against the governor on an education platform in the primary, which of course didn't turn out. And so therefore I was not able to remain as state superintendent. So I regret that because I love the work. And what I learned from that is go with your gut, listen and pray things through. Listen to your wife. The governor and I still have a great relationship. I mean, it was politics. We mended our fences and we have a good relationship. So,
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, I've got the next 2 questions. What steps are important to take to ensure you aren't exposing the school or the school district to special education liability?
I can give you some good examples. When I became a district superintendent, the district that I was in, day one that I walked into a special ed mediation hearing. I was not informed by my board that I had not had a special ed director for 6 months in that district. And so when I walked into the special ed mediation hearing, I had no special ed director with me. I had no attorneys. Here are parents and attorneys. And we just went ahead and had our meeting. And the bottom line was, it was simply an IEP situation, and the district wasn't meeting the IEP, wasn't fulfilling the IEP. We addressed that. It was fine. So I think what I learned from that and how you work on keeping the district out of liable situations or liability with special ed, first and foremost, you have to communicate with parents. You have to communicate openly. You have to communicate frequently. You have to communicate. And as educators, we're great with educationese and jargon and our acronyms. A lot of folks don't understand that. So make sure we're communicating in a way that they understand what's in an IEP and what you're trying to accomplish. Make sure they understand their rights. Make sure they're welcomed at meetings. Aside from that, make sure you have a solid special ed director who can lead your district, who has a firm grasp on special education law. My special education director established at each school in our district a lead teacher in special education that she was able to communicate with on a regular basis, because you have a number of special ed teachers in each school, and so that kind of streamlined things. So when it came to making sure that trainings were provided and communication was back and forth, she communicated with those lead teachers. Making sure that your special education teachers have the training that they need, the professional learning that they need. When it comes to IEPs and writing IEPs, changes in law, making sure your academic teachers who are maybe teaching full inclusion, making sure that they have an understanding of IEPs, making sure they know how to implement those accommodations that are met. So communication is key, making sure that as a district you have trained your staff with the professional learning that they need with special education are all key elements to make sure that you stay out of trouble.
Okay. Many parents are concerned about safety in school, but safety has many implications, such as the safety of the physical plant, protection of students from physical harm, security of the school facilities, and social and emotional safety and well-being of students. How would you work to operate a safe environment for our students?
Well, it's multifaceted, as you have addressed. So there are ways that you address it with your facilities. In fact, my 6-year education research project was on educational facility design and its impact on student discipline. So you can make sure that your facilities are designed in a way to help discipline as opposed to create opportunities for things to happen. And not just discipline, but safety issues as well. Going through and doing a review of your schools, an audit of your schools in light of current, let's say, trends when it comes to design with safety issues. I know a lot of our districts in Georgia have moved to vestibules in your schools so that when parents or anyone comes in to the school, their only egress is into the office. They can't just go into the school. They have to come through the office. Those, and then the office has to, kind of buzz them through the door to get into wherever they're going. So there are issues like that. There are issues around cameras, making sure your cameras are operational. As a superintendent in the district I was in, worked with staff, worked with board members, and we actually, and you know, people are on different sides of this spectrum, but there are so many pluses to it. We actually put cameras in every classroom in the district, and put in surround systems so that teachers were able to not shout and use their voices, but you know, they have wear a little microphone, and so their classes are being recorded. We put in very stringent policies as a board as to who had access to that footage, when they had access to it, the processes that they needed to, or the procedures they needed to follow to get access to it, who had to approve it, et cetera, because your teachers need to feel like they are being cared for, that they're not being spied. It wasn't that. It was about safety, because we had issues with students accusing teachers of things that teachers weren't doing. And we could go back and we could pull that footage and we can see that. It helped with fights in classrooms because students knew that those cameras were on. It helped teachers when they were going to be out. They could record their lesson and the substitute just simply play it back for students. If students were hospital homebound, it helped students be able to see their teacher real time if they decided to do it that way, or they could just send that as a link to the students at their home. So there are so many different benefits to that that helped in our district as well. You know, and heaven forbid that you have a situation where you have you know, a shooter or something like that into your school district. But having those cameras also, we were able to establish links into the sheriff's department, so that in the event we had a situation like that, the sheriff could immediately have access to all of our cameras and know exactly where that perpetrator would be in the building at that time. So many different issues there. One of the things that I've done in my consulting work is provide training to school districts across the country in trauma-informed learning. And making, and it's not just trauma-informed learning, but it's also giving teachers the skills that they need. It's not just identifying it, but how do you change what you do once you identify it to make sure a child is successful. So, you know, it's called the trauma skilled model. And we go through and we help teachers understand how trauma impacts the brain, and especially when students go through trauma at a young age. When the brain is in rapid development and what that does. And so many times student misbehavior isn't because they're just a bad kid. There is a trigger, and if we know what that trigger is, we might be able to address that issue and actually move that student to where they need to be, as you know, as far as their behavior and their academic learning. So I think I got all parts of your question, but it is a multifaceted question. There are a number of things that we can do to make sure that we have a safe environment, we have a positive learning environment, and that teachers are equipped with the skills that they need in their classrooms.
I'm Tracy Stritchick. I don't think we've introduced
I know,
ourselves.
yes, we did not. I'm sorry.
Dr. Boyd, he's our interim superintendent, and then you have Kim Crockett.
Thank you.
Billy Holland.
Jamie Jackson.
And I'm Kyle Glover.
Nice to meet
Better
you.
next time.
I have the next two questions.
Very good.
High performance by students and accountability are priorities for us. How would you assess the current student performance level in our school system? How would you assess the effectiveness of our teachers and programs?
Okay. So I've already begun to assess where you are, looking at the Alabama State Report Card. That's one way that you assess, is you look at that data. You look at summative assessments. You look at those end-of-the-year assessments, but you don't just look at the district score, because things can, and I learned this as a curriculum director in a Metro Atlanta school district. You know, I had my middle schools, they looked great in an aggregate form, but when I started digging down, I saw that we had one issue at one school. And if you really don't take the time to disaggregate and look at those subpopulations, look at those subgroups, you might miss something. You might miss an opportunity for growth, especially if you are doing okay as a district, you're a high-performing district, or you're a middle-of-the-road average district. You've got to find those areas where you can continue to see growth, where you can continue to move the needle for all students. And that's what we have to keep in mind, is that we're here for all children. And we've got to keep our focus on making sure all children are successful, they're college and career ready. So disaggregating that data, looking at the specific areas of weakness. In our situation, where I was, it boiled down to, it wasn't just one school, it was one teacher's classroom, where the number of students who were not performing where they needed to be, that was not only pulling that district down, but also impacting, that school, but also impacting the district scores in a different degree. So that enabled us to do specific targeted professional learning with that teacher and not do some shotgun approach. I've been an administrator long enough to know that teachers don't like to say, you're all going to go through this training because that's not really what we need. We might have one person that needs it. So individualized professional learning for teachers is incredibly important. Looking at the assessment data, and not only the summative data, but also formative assessment. So looking at things as you're progressing through the school year, if it's reading, if you're doing a Dibbles assessment or SRI inventory, look at those students as they progress during the school year, because if they're not performing where they need to be, you can make instructional changes then and not have to wait until the end of the year. With the Alabama Reading Initiative now, if they're not on grade level by third grade, then you have some issues, and that starts this school year. So it's really important to make sure that you are assessing throughout the year in a formative way and looking at that assessment. As far as teachers and evaluating teachers, I think you have the Alabama Teacher Growth Program. You have the formative assessment or the formative evaluation tool, but informal evaluation is also key. And I think it's important that we have a growth mindset. And I know that growth is a part of the accountability system for the state of Alabama, and I see your growth scores on your school districts, because it is incredibly important for teacher confidence level, teacher just the having a positive perception of the work that they do. I'll give you an example. You have a fifth grade teacher who has a fourth grader come, promote and come into her classroom, and that student at the beginning of fifth grade is reading on a second grade level. That teacher works with that student all year long. At the end of the school year, the student takes the fifth grade assessment, does not pass. If that's all you're looking at, and you penalize that teacher for not getting the student across the finish line, you miss the growth. This student actually is testing and reading on a fourth grade level. So this teacher made 2 years of growth with that child in 1 year. That should be celebrated. We're not all the way there, but we made tremendous growth. And so I think it's important for all of our teachers to have a growth mindset as we evaluate. For us as administrators to maintain that growth mindset.
What about the effectiveness of programs? You
The
addressed
effectiveness of programs. I think you have to look at, you've got to look at your goals as a district. If your goals are X, Y, Z, and you have this program that you have implemented to help you get across that finish line, if you're not getting there, then we have to look at, is that program what we need? Is it helping us achieve our goals? So I think doing an audit on a regular basis of your programs to make sure that they are getting you the results that you want and not a waste of taxpayers' money is incredibly important.
Thank you. What is your experience and opinion regarding the student-centered educational model, and how would you use data to guide your recommendations regarding student success?
Okay. You may have to remind me of the last part of that question.
That's okay. I
as
will.
well. So I'll have to tell you one of the best schools I've ever visited in my life was when I was state superintendent, and I visited the Walton Rural Education Center in Walton, Kansas. In that school, this was back in the days of AYP, if you remember that. The school had never made AYP. They were facing state takeover. The teachers were flustered because they knew that they were teaching the standards. They knew they were. But when the tests came back, the students still weren't performing where they needed to be, and they weren't making AYP. So as a last-ditch effort, they became a charter school, got some money, and they transitioned the way they taught all of their core academic standards. They went to a project-based learning approach, which is a student-centered approach. What they found in this was, and I'll give you an example that they provided me, was one of the math standards, and I can't remember if it was, I think it was fourth grade, was gathering data, putting data into charts and graphs and being able to interpret charts and graphs and things like that. Oh, that wasn't it. I'll get back to that. There was a standard tested on the state test that dealt with the proper unit of measurement. And so the question that was asked on the state test, and the teachers taught it, they knew their kids knew it, but the question that was asked on the state test was, the students had to look at a little square, and the question was, what is the proper unit of measurement for acreage, for an acre, well, for a field? Anyway, the children are looking at this square, and so naturally they're guessing inch, they're guessing millimeter, because what are you going to measure that little square with? Well, it wasn't, the proper unit of measurement for a field was an acre, so they changed how they taught. So they took children outside to see the field and actually measure off, and they began to see it, the proper unit of measurement for that. So the project-based approach that they adopted is every class, every grade level in that school had a year-long project that they worked on, and all of their standards were taught through agriculture, because every child in that school had some connection to agriculture. So agriculture was relevant to them. They understood that language. And so, the kindergarten classroom that I visited, they had animal bones laid out on a desk with a ruler. So they learned measuring animal bones. And they had a veterinarian come in a couple of days a week as a guest teacher that would teach the students about these bones and about the length and how they could use that to determine the age and what type of animal, et cetera, et cetera. They had a chicken coop, and the third grade project was the chickens. And they learned their math standards, their times tables as it related to the eggs that they were gathering, and they were doing 2 times 12, and they had the hands-on approach. They sold the eggs to the community, and so they dealt with change and making change and that type of thing. They had a wind turbine donated to the school that they powered their greenhouse with. The fourth grade was daily graphing the amount of energy that was being created by the wind turbine. And then the fifth grade was studying hydroponics, and they were growing vegetables and flowers and things there in the greenhouse. That school in 2 years went from never making AYP to 98% passing in English language arts and 100% passing in math, and became a national model school. So the whole point is making sure that in a student-centered approach that we identify, or that we make learning relevant for students. With our technology, our phones, and the immediate access that students have to information, a sit and get model with a lecture and take notes and fill out this study guide, this worksheet, it's not going to engage them. We've got to engage them. We have to inspire them. We do that by making learning relevant to them through a project-based learning approach. So the last part of your question was?
I think you covered it, but use data to guide your recommendations regarding student success.
Yeah,
I think you covered that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You can measure that on your student assessments.
Yeah.
Good morning. I have the next 2 questions.
Awesome.
All right. What involvement have you had in budget development and ongoing fiscal management? And please give concrete examples when possible concerning such areas as community involvement in the budget process, multi-year fiscal planning, and budget development.
Okay, very good. As State Superintendent, I've managed an $8+ billion budget for the state of Georgia. So we operated out of a mandate from the governor's office on a zero-based budget mentality. So my divisions within the department, basically had to present what their needs were and the amount of money that they needed, and it had to come out to a zero-based balance. So that was at the state level. At the district level, there are, just like there are here, there are laws that require open meetings for the public. I worked with the board to establish that budget with the CFO We would come up with our draft budgets. We would present those to the community in public meetings. We're required by law to have 2 meetings. And you give the public opportunity to speak and give input. And that's very, very important. And it's very important as a school district that you celebrate your successes. Because and that's something that I learned at the local level, is that many times there are great things that are going on in our schools, and our communities don't know. And our community people don't, and we typically are not, and I know I'm guilty, I don't like to toot my own horn. We like to get our work done, but it's very important for taxpayers to know that you're being responsible with their money, and that you're getting results, and that the return on investment is very strong. In fact, that's one of the things that this is kind of rabbit trail, but as State Superintendent, we created a new accountability system for Georgia. And we were one of the first states in the nation to receive a waiver from No Child Left Behind because of our new accountability system, which is the College and Career Ready Performance Index. And we actually put in there a return on investment measure. So on every school's report card in Georgia, you can look at per pupil expenditure at that district, and then they are basically given a star rating based on their financial efficiency. So how much are they spending, and what is the return on investment? What are the results that you're getting for the taxpayers' money that you're using? And it's not a got-you tool, because the whole idea was, if we have a district over here that is very similar and they're getting better results, what can we do as a state to bring these two people together to learn from each other so that they can be more efficient? Because the bottom line is students are learning. So in a multi-year process, the budget is year to year, but from a multi-year perspective, I've worked with, in Georgia, we have eSPLOST, Education Special Purpose Local Option Sales Taxes. Those are 5-year programs, and you have to get your voters to approve those. And so as a school district leader, you're kind of in charge for making sure your community understands what you're asking them to pay for. So rather than increase the millage rate, you're asking them to increase a tax on themselves of 1 cent, a sales tax on everything that's purchased within the county or the city or whatever your lines are. And so in order to do that, you have to make sure that the community understands. You give them the input. You have community meetings. You put community people on your committees to gather input themselves from the community, have your meetings, find out what the community wants, communicate your needs as a district, that these are needs that we have and this is what we want these tax dollars to go to. Now, what are some things that you guys want to see? And then you put together a list of proposed projects, and you remain faithful to that list. You communicate openly over the 5 years on a regular basis with your community. These projects are now complete. We still have these to go. This is how much money we're collecting on our sales tax. This is where it's spent. And you be transparent with them, because you're going to want to, at some point, pass another eSPLOST or pass a bond referendum. Heaven forbid that you have to ask for a millage rate increase. But the community has to feel like you have been transparent with them, that you are getting results for the money that you do have, and that they see the need, that you are clearly communicating what needs that you have for the increased taxation. So does that help?
Yes. It kind of goes into my next question.
Okay.
You might have kind of answered a lot of it. If you were selected as the superintendent of Watauga County Schools, what strategies would you use to increase revenue based on sales and ad valorem tax increases?
Well, there are all kinds of ways that you can increase revenue. I'm very, because of my upbringing, I'm very conservative financially, when it comes to money, and even more so with other people's money. One of the things that in the district that I was superintendent of, we didn't have the luxury. We had an eSPLOST and we got it passed, but there was very little in the county for shopping, retail, that type of thing. I'm sure you guys have counties like this in Alabama, but we did not have a red light in the entire county. All of our shopping went, to the county next door. So our 1 cent sales tax didn't necessarily generate the amount of revenue that we needed year to year. Over the 5 years, sure. So you can increase revenue oftentimes by decreasing spending. And so one of the things that I did was when I came in, basically did an audit of our class size. And I saw the district that was actually not getting the money that they deserved from the state because we had too few students assigned to classrooms. We had people building class schedules that didn't understand minimum funding size. That, you know, here you have a high school math class of 7 students. The state's not going to fund that class because the minimum funding size is 21. And so the district, you still have the class, the district is funding that out of its pocket. And so in order to make sure that we increased our revenue when we couldn't necessarily increase taxes or, you know, make people spend more money for our eSPLOST, is make sure that we had students coded correctly, we were earning the right money for them from the state. Say if they were a gifted student or a special needs student, that they were coded correctly in that system, make sure all of our classes were meeting minimum funding size, that type of thing. That way, I was able to, over a period of years there, cut the budget every year because we had declining enrollment. And so our FTE dollars were going down because of declining enrollment, but still add programs to our school. We were able to add an art teacher at the elementary school. We were able to give teacher bonuses at Christmas by simply making sure that we were maximizing our FTE funding from the state. I also, in that district, negotiated a energy management contract that gave us some revenue to meet some infrastructure needs, critical infrastructure needs. My air conditioning systems at the high school were going out left and right, and to replace one unit was $5,000, and there was no money in the budget. The district had no money to deal with those issues as they were going out, and so we entered into an energy management contract with a company, and through that we're able to redo all of our air conditioning systems in the high school, get all new air conditioning systems, get all new lighting across the district, and reduce the amount of money that we were spending on our energy bills, and it was basically a self-sustaining or self-paying issue. So we did create some opportunities that way. But again, I think going back to just getting, if you're going to ask for a tax increase, then you have to be clear in your communication. You have to be honest. You have to promote and celebrate what's good, and you have to be honest with what's not, and make sure that you're communicating that with your community and what your plans are to fix those. And then they feel like they can have trust. Trust is very important.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Dr. Barge, I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. They've been very technical, and I'm going to get a little bit personal, if that's okay.
Okay.
You've said you didn't like to toot your horn, and I certainly can appreciate that, but as we're tasked with selecting a new superintendent, what are the top 3 strengths and or attributes that you bring that would benefit our district?
Well, I think first and foremost is visionary leadership. I've never been one to be constrained with there's no solution. I like to say that I am a problem solver and bring that as well. And I will give you some examples. Getting back to relevant instruction. Making sure that all students have an opportunity to be successful. I know the value of career and technical education. And so as State Superintendent, I created Georgia's career pathway system. We have over 100 career pathways in the state of Georgia for students to choose from that fall into 17 different career clusters. I know that you all have 16. We adopted the 16 national cluster model, but we added the 17th cluster of energy because energy is a big piece of the future when it comes to jobs for students. And so we worked closely with business and industry leaders across the state in developing those. We worked with our technical college partners to make sure courses would count for dual enrollment. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I did with the career pathway model is make it flexible, because technology changes rapidly. And we're preparing students today for jobs that don't exist. And so we need to have a model that is able to shift and not have to, the old bureaucratic model of it taking forever to change. And so we did that, and as a local school district, I used that flexibility. Because what I wanted to do was economic development and education are inextricably linked. And if you cannot provide not only an educated workforce, but a skilled workforce in your community, you're going to have trouble with your economic development. And so we wanted communities to be able to develop their own career pathways specific to needs that they may have. And I used that where I was superintendent. The largest industry we were on the Georgia coast, and the largest industry in our county was shrimping. When I arrived there, I had a situation that I've never seen before, but we were basically a 50-50 African-American white student population community. My graduation rate of my African-American students was 96%, and my graduation rate of my white students was 68%. The data couldn't show me where that was happening. I couldn't. Anecdotally, just through talking with students, talking with teachers, talking with parents, we found out that these students that weren't graduating were dropping out and going to work on the shrimp boats that their aunts or uncles owned, their grandparents owned, or whatever. I mean, what high school kid's not going to want to be out on the ocean as opposed to in a desk in a classroom? And so what we did was we created our own pathway in commercial fishing. The only high school on the East Coast of the United States that has a career pathway in commercial fishing. So we worked with the shrimping industry, the University of Georgia, the technical college system, and we created a 3-course pathway for high school students that would not only prepare them, but it gave them college credit at the local technical college. It gave them an industry-recognized credential through the shrimping industry. The shrimping industry was ecstatic because they were getting a better skilled and trained shrimper when the students graduated. If the students chose to, they could go on to the local technical college and get the second level of certification that they worked with the shrimping industry on. So, so being able to have that vision to create solutions, I think, is important. Being able to see those solutions through by collaborating with people within your community. So I think another strength that I would bring is that experience in collaboration and working with communities. I sat on our Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors where I was superintendent. I sat on our Public Health Board of Directors. I worked with our emergency management team, housed the military when we had a hurricane, and housed them in one of our schools. And so that experience, I have a breadth of experience, not only at a district level, but a state level and a national level. I've been able to engage with audiences on a national level, on an international level. I was invited to speak in Korea at one of their major educational conferences on what we did in Georgia when it comes to student relationships and building student relationships. So I think all of those things are things that I could bring to the table that would benefit Autauga County and the students. And I'm excited for the opportunity.
Good. We have a lot of pride in our community. There's a lot of great history here, from academics, athletics, the whole nine, okay? And we have 4 very distinct communities in this system. Give me an example or tell me how you would unite those 4 distinct communities and unite that into one system, one team.
Yeah, it's very important that you have a school system and not a system of schools. And you do that with open communication. You do that with your strategic planning process. I would work with you all as a board to outline our strategic planning. One of the things that I'd like to do as superintendent is have advisory committees, numerous advisory committees. So I would have a teacher advisory committee. I would have a student advisory committee. I would have a parent advisory committee. And in many cases, a a community advisory committee. So having all of those voices, you know, when people feel like they have a voice in what's happening, there's buy-in. And so by making sure that you have people from all 4 of those communities represented on those committees, that's critical. By having a strategic plan that we all agree on, that the board agrees on, we've all agreed on these are our goals, these are our initiatives, this is our mission. That strategic plan guides what we do. And so when they have a voice in that, that is helpful. I think celebrating the diversity in those communities, making sure they all feel celebrated and appreciated. I think you highlight, you know, diversity is incredibly important. And I know that can be a really difficult word for a lot of folks. But there is strength in our diversity. There is strength in this community from the differences, and being able to bring all those differences together makes the community what it is. And so I think, you know, relying on your assistance as board members and your connections with your communities, working with business and industry, and having everybody at the table and having everybody with that voice, and then highlighting their uniquenesses and the positive things that they bring would be very important.
Okay. Dr. Barge, thank you so very much.
Sure, I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, that concludes all of our questions that we have. We have about 5 minutes. If any board member has anything that is just burning to ask Dr. Barge, now would be the time.
Is there anything that we didn't ask you that you wished we would ask you,
Oh, my.
or that you would want us to know about you?
Well, I think I said it, but I love education, and education levels the playing field for all of our children. And we're just in a real critical time to make sure that, I mean, you guys have heard about ChatGPT, artificial intelligence. We're at a critical time where we need to cherish the past, but enable the future. And the future's coming at us, whether we like it or not. And so we need to have that visionary leadership to make sure that we can guide our students in the right direction. Artificial intelligence can answer the questions for them, but do they know that the answers that the artificial intelligence provides are accurate? Do they have the work ethic that they need? Do they have the self-leadership that they need? Do they have empathy? Do they have integrity? Do they have honesty? All those things that we can help students acquire to make them college and career ready. Because if you all have kids that if you sent to college, you know the most expensive career development program we have is college. We can do a much better job preparing kids to be successful when they leave us.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you
y'all.
for your time, and we appreciate you very much. So,
Thank you.
okay, we'll take a quick break before we bring in our next one.